Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Brewer fans, it's the All-Star break, and the Brewers, a little bit of a rough week. Here to talk about with me today, we've got Vince Servato and Scott Bartell. How you guys doing?
Hey, Craig. Doing great. Just wonderful.
Craig, I'm not going to lie. I'm extremely angry, but you know what? We're going to have fun, Brewer fans. Let's, talk ourselves off the ledge and let's just enjoy this. Maybe a little bit of ranting, a little bit of reminiscing, and let's try not to get too angry. Well, Craig, you can get angry, of course, but
Actually, no.
Perspective.
My anger management specialist said I was doing very well, making huge strides. And then this last week happened, so
that's not accurate. Yeah, no.
So anyway, let's not dwell on this past week too much. But I guess kind of just mentioned that the Brewers had the worst series in team history, a 5-game sweep in Pittsburgh against the Pirates somehow. Also lost 2 of 3 of the Marlins, so 1-7 road trip, not ideal. We're in first place a couple of games last time.
Who won the prediction?
Sorry, you guys. Now we're 2.5 games behind the Cubs. It's all-star break. Everyone's going to just let all that go and move forward. And we're still, if the season were to end today, the Brewers will still be in the playoffs. So with that being said, I'm going to throw this out as our first topic, guys. Unless you guys want to get some bluffs so your anger out of your system if you haven't already done that. Or
can we have a couple points really quick, Craig? I think that we need to get like 30 seconds each worth of anger out. And then also, is Chad on the show here? Scott, did you talk to Chad? Did you say you talked to him earlier?
I did not. I think he said something about he was, I don't know, celebrating the World Cup.
Oh, yeah, right. He does love the French. Okay, cool. So Craig, you brought up the last week. I think we do have to touch on it really quick, and I know that we all want to move on as fans, and it's the All-Star break. You hope for a clean slate, going into the second half. But I do think that just the way that those games were lost, every team does go through a stretch of 4 games, and there was a stat that was circulated around social media and on MLB Network this past week that rightfully points out, that amongst the last 5 World Series winners, each of those teams had at least a 5-game losing streak during the course of the year. And many of those teams had a 6-game losing streak. And some teams had multiple, 4 or 5-game losing streak and still went on to win the World Series. So we do have to keep that in mind. So that is important. I just think that the way that the games themselves were lost is really what gets the fans when you have not only losing 2 of 3 to the last place Miami Marlins, but losing 2 of the 3 games in extra innings, in just emotionally draining fashion. And then to go into Pittsburgh, and not only do we get swept in a typical 3-game series or even a 4-game series, but we get swept in a 5-game series. And including at least one game that was an incredibly emotionally draining game. Unfortunately, the last game right before the break, just incredibly devastating. So I think that's why fans are partially just, very upset about this, and I think it's also because of what happened last year. Not that the two are necessarily comparable, but anyway, that was my 30 seconds.
Scott?
Okay, well, first off, I just want everyone to know we all have different ways of coping. However you gotta do it. You just gotta, do it whatever it takes to get by and just put it behind you and try to move forward. Also, don't blame yourselves, Brewer fans. You guys did great. You voted Jesus Aguilar, who is just doing, I'm sure is going to be doing great. Wait, is he already eliminated from the home run derby? We just started. Okay, never mind. But it's still a great experience for him to, participate in the game. And we have 5 potential All-Stars that are going to be doing a great job in the All-Star game, I assume. So let's just, stay on the positive. And I assume Stearns is going to do something to help this team out a little bit. I don't know. Did anybody else, even we had the lead in the, in the 8th and the 9th and the very last game, we were just like, there's only like a 50-50 chance we're going to win this game. Like, I don't know. I found myself being very pessimistic by the end of that series. Just like, let's just get out of here.
Yeah, I think that there was some thoughts just at the beginning of it that we don't play well all of a sudden in Pittsburgh. There were years, if you guys remember, I know both of you guys are long-time fans, and in Pittsburgh, it seemed like the Brewers could just walk in there and dominate them every year from like 2005 to 2013. It just seemed like it was the games that we were looking forward to most on the schedule. But the last couple of years, the Pirates have played us really tough. And it seems like especially in Pittsburgh. So I think we all remember us getting swept in a 4-game series right around the break last year. And I think that did play a part. I did think we were going to win that last game, though, after we scored again in the 10th. So that was pretty devastating to give up 2 in the middle of a deluge in the bottom of the 10th against Pittsburgh. And I will say that I hope that I'm wrong, but it just seems like Corey Knebel really is struggling in that role at the end of the game as a closer. And I just think that the team has got to be starting to look at different options out at the end of the game in the bullpen.
The last game in Pittsburgh is like one of those ones like, please, can we just salvage this game going into the break and, hope the Cubs lose that day too. I mean, I'm just thinking how every Brewer fan was thinking that day. And then, every time we even had a lead, it's like it was a sigh of relief, but then you were also very concerned. And even the announcers, who I think just wanted to get to the All-Star break and get it over with, had no confidence that things were going to go well. The rain was coming in. The Brewers were blowing multiple leads. I think they just wanted to get the heck out of town. And there's no way of doing it with a win. So anyway, with that being said, Scott, it was nice to point out that we do want to congratulate Jesus Aguilar, who won the NL fan vote and was voted into the All-Star game. And congratulations to Brewer fans who spent hours of their work week early last week, dedicated enough to vote a couple hundred times each, at least, I'm sure, to get Jesus in there. So that just shows what great fans Milwaukee has. And also congratulations to JJ, Jeremy Jeffress, who we interviewed way back in the day in West Virginia when he was in the minor leagues. He's now an all-star, too, as he got the call as a fill-in, as a reserve. And congratulations. So basically, you were talking 5 Brewer all-stars. When's the last time that's happened?
It's never happened, guys. That's pretty exciting in and of itself. There's never been a Brewers team since the history of the franchise in 1969 that we've had 5 all-stars. So four all-stars was our previous high watermark. We did it 5 different times, as I'm sure you guys saw on Brewers Twitter this week from our intern, Esmeralda. But we were able to do it this year with 5 all-stars. And Craig, it kind of goes back to something you've said for many years, and I think it's really dawned on me this year. It's really cool to see a guy like Jeremy Jeffress, who we interviewed at the lowest levels of the minor leagues. We knew he was a prospect. He was a number 1 draft pick back in, 2007. But to see him go from being a minor league kid, for lack of a better term, over a decade ago, essentially, to seeing him now here in Washington, D.C. this week, taking the field in a Major League All-Star game, it's pretty awesome. It really is all about the journey for these guys on an individual level in many ways, and it really does highlight the story component of what you've been talking about for a lot of years.
Yeah, I mean, just to see a guy who was drafted in the first round as a starting pitcher out of high school and through all those years of development and ultimately not making it as a starter and having his major league struggles and ups and downs and even having struggled in the bullpen, rejoining the Brewers a couple of times and then finally making an all-star game after all those ups and downs and career path. It's kind of something. A guy like that, you got to be happy for.
You definitely. And some off the field issues too, Craig. Too. That to me, it's a testament to the Brewers too for sticking with him in many ways. Well, I guess we gave up on him 3 times, but we did here twice. But we did get him back again, and it's pretty awesome to see. That's a great story.
And I think he really was a key piece in going over along with Luke Croy to Texas to bring us Brentz in, who ultimately flipped over for Christian Yelich, who I think is going to be a huge part of the Brewers' future, and hopefully first ever World Series win before his contract's over. But you never know, so just trying to stay positive. With that being said, I don't fault Brewer fans for being so down on the crew after this past week. I think the Cubs were always that sleeping giant, and I think most Brewer fans will admit that they kind of felt that they would have a hard time holding off the Cubs to a division title, just like last year, due to the difference in talent level, pretty much, and where they're at as far as their, the roster, part of the rebuild and whatnot. The Brewers, most people admit, are just not on that same level as the Cubs, so that's disheartening. But I don't know. This is, I guess, the first topic I'm going to throw out there. There's a couple different ways the Brewers can go coming out of the All-Star break. Obviously, there's rumors that we're even looking into rental pieces, like high-end rental pieces like Manny Machado, and possibly one of the finalists for them. I guess the question to you guys that I'll propose is, as a Brewer fan, do you think the Brewers should do one of these things and then maybe give your argument why? Number one, we're still right there in first place for it. We'd have a wild card spot if the season ended today. Should we continue to go for it this season and possibly sell off some major pieces for the future for a rental like Manny Machado? Should we still go for it a little bit more than we did last year and acquire some difference-making pieces, but not necessarily mortgage our top prospects like Burns or Hero or something, but still try to improve the roster? Let's see. C, should the Brewers just kind of leave the roster alone and reassess things right before the deadline, or just be content with the depth that our roster currently has? Or D, I've actually heard some Brewer fans speculate that maybe we should even flip the entire script and say, well, this isn't going to be the year that we're going to go deep in the playoffs even if we get there. So maybe we should continue our last year of rebuild and even consider being sellers. I guess, I don't know who wants to go first on that one, but what are your overall thoughts on what course, if you're David Stearns, GM of the Brewers, what do you do going forward? And what do you feel as a GM you would owe the fans, if anything, at this point, especially this being the second year in a row that the Brewers have a chance to make the playoff and be contenders going forward?
I mean, boy, that's a tough question. I just generally think that taking a pragmatic look at things is always best. In this case, I think being pragmatic means that you've got, some clear needs on this team that it wouldn't necessarily be mortgaging the future to go out and get some guys to help fill those needs. I think that doesn't preclude the possibility of getting a rental player. A lot has been made or talked about with Manny Machado. Latest rumors have him going to Philadelphia, but I guess we'll find out probably this week. But, there's others out there who are free agents after the year, like a Brian Dozier type. I don't know. I don't think that – I think that it all comes down to cost on that. I don't think that David Stearns would be wise to give up Hira or Burns or Peralta in a move for a rental player, and I don't think he's going to. But, if you see – and that is different than the Doug Melvin, all-in philosophy at CC, obviously, in 2008 when we were going for our first playoff appearance in 1982, when we traded a slew of, at that time, top prospects for a rental. But, if the price is right, I could see us doing a rental, getting us through this season. If not, I think that there'll probably be a couple smaller moves, kind of like in the Neil Walker, Anthony Schwarzak vein from last season, and I don't know if that'll be enough or not, but that could also be a very distinct possibility.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Vince, because I don't think that if we just say, hey, you know what, we're gonna get Brian Dozier or what's the guy from Kansas City? I already forgot his name.
Whit Merrifield.
Yeah,
Merrifield talked about.
Yeah,
yep.
So if I don't think that that's going to be enough to actually get us to make a deep run in the playoffs. I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, I think once you actually get to the playoffs, of course, anything can happen. But a guy like you sign somebody like that, you don't know, or you trade for somebody like that, you don't know that you're actually going to make the playoffs. I think Manny Machado is probably the guy that's probably going to give us the best chance to really boost our lineup, because our pitching, despite not having in any way, our pitching is still doing a great job, mostly because of the bullpen. But just being able to do enough with offensively with that lineup. Unfortunately, we're only about at 6 players deep, and I really think we need to add another offensive player. So to answer your question, I guess finally after all that, I think we have to make a move. However, I don't like a rental in Machado. So I would actually do multiple smaller moves, and I might even consider going after an ace type pitcher like like a DeGrom or something like that. But I don't know about Machado. I'm not super sold on giving up.
One of the big differences with a guy like DeGrom is that, you know, any ace starting pitcher, it seems like, to me at least, that's available right now is not just a rental. So in that case, I think we should be seriously considering moves for any of our prospects if the right, you know, option becomes available with the starting pitcher who would be here more than just this year. But to get back to the Machado talk, you know, there's obviously been a lot of noise about that just because he is such a big name. Machado's great. I mean, the talent level is obviously there. He's, to me, one of the best hitters in baseball. I don't think that the Brewers should be opposed to going out and getting him if the price is right. Now, I don't know what that final prospect piece going back to Baltimore is going to look like. Baltimore is an organization that constantly surprises in terms of what they get back in trades, and I don't know if it's going to cost what people think it's going to. We'll see. So if the option is there to get him and it's not going to cost us one of our top 3-4 prospects, if that's a possibility, then you do it. And I think we should just look at our shortstop's offensive production over the course of the season. I believe that the stat is that we are 29th out of 30 major league teams in offensive production from the shortstop position. So obviously acquiring a shortstop, even for the last 2.5 months of the year, in a guy like Machado would be a huge boost in the arm for an offense that could probably use it.
Yeah, that's an insta-fix. And then you figure you could probably slide Saladino over to second, and that kind of fixes that a little bit. Not a bad option, I guess.
Yeah, and you've still got DR, who's not hitting terrible. I think he's at 264, you know, going into the All-Star break with his batting average. And, you know, if you've got a platoon with him and Saladino or just some sort of soft platoon going there, I think that could work. Or maybe we target another second baseman as well as Machado. I don't know what's going to happen with the middle infield, but I do know that our production has been woeful at the shortstop position, and that, you know, as of today, we're ranked near last in the major league production from that position. So, you know, and I think that we should also quickly point out that even though Machado is a rental, the Brewers do have both Arcia still in AAA and hopefully a healthy Mauricio Dubon coming back next season. So if Machado can just hold us over until the end of this year, we would have maybe Arcia finds it, so to speak, in AAA, or we've got Dubon coming back next season. Perhaps, you know, that's the answer just to get us through the last couple months of this year. I don't know.
And a quick hats off or props to Keon Broxton and Brett Phillips, who have managed to, in very limited duty at the major league level, be able to up their stock just a little bit.
Well, and that's another point too about Machado. So if you guys are looking at, you know, markets for, you know, or are looking at who we might acquire and what other teams might want from us, if it's not going to cost, if we say that we are agreed that we're not going to trade Hero or Peralta or Burns, and you know, you're Baltimore, would you be willing to trade for a guy like Brett Phillips? You know, knowing that he's not hit well in the big leagues in his last year or this year in his brief call-ups, but does he still have enough prospect capital, so to speak, to land a guy like a rental like Machado?
You guys make a lot of great points, and I agree with kind of a hybrid of your guys' plan as far as what to do. First of all, before we go on discussing more, I do agree also with your assessment, Vince, and I think most of our fans would, that our 3 quote-unquote blue chip prospects, even though I feel we have like a whole bunch of them, really at this point are probably Hira, Burns, and Peralta. And Peralta so much so that I would say he's actually untouchable because of what he's shown at the major league level, where the other guys really haven't yet. I would really see the Brewers hard-pressed in trading Freddie Peralta right now. But with that being said, I mean, unless it's for someone like a DeGrom, which, again, to that point, I don't think he was going to be available, or Syndergaard. Those are the only two players out there that I would even consider. They're controllable ace starters for several years. That's the only one I'd even consider trading someone like Peralta. With that being said, I think, going back to my original question, the last option I went to, where some Brewer fans are actually like, knee-jerk reaction over this past week and saying, instead of the fact we have 5 all-stars, we're not as good as the Cubs, we're not going to win the division. We get in the wild card game, we don't really even have an ace to throw. Are we really going to go all in just for a one-game playoff and get eliminated and get sent home or whatever? Well, we're definitely not going to turn over and continue to rebuild and turn into sellers. That's out the window right away. I think after finishing game out of the playoffs last year, and we're right there this year in a playoff spot right now, Stearns and the Brewers organization, I think Athanasio feels the same way. It's the fans to do a little bit more than they definitely did last year in acquiring just middling players like Walker and Swarzak. I think they need to make a little bit better moves this year, and I feel that they will do that. So, with that being said, I do not want us going after Machado because I think the price will be too high, and I don't want to pay. I think it would take one of our blue chip prospects to get him, unless either that or it would take like 5 or so of our other, or 3 to 5 of our other top 10 just for a couple months of Machado. I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think we're quite there. I think if Machado was afraid of next year or one of the next 2 years, then yeah, go for it. But with Nelson not being healthy and Braun not hitting and other, other reasons, I just don't think this year to go after that high end of a rental. With that being said, I also am kind of discouraged with the fact that both Syndergaard and DeGrom will not be made available, and there aren't very many other controllable starting pitchers that will be thrown out of the market that I'm really that interested anymore. Really kind of not interested in Chris Archer anymore if he's made available. Not all that interested. Stroman's having a bad year. I would be willing to pay for him, but the Blue Jays probably will still have a high asking price on that, and so there's some risk involved that I don't know if I'm as comfortable with anymore for someone like him. Danny Duffy I'm not really interested in. So you're getting down to those controllables.
Thrown around now too, I guess.
What was the last one, Scott?
Nate Eovaldi.
Oh yeah, Nate Eovaldi. Yeah, Greg, I hear what you're saying. I tend to think of Stroman as a great buy low candidate if the Jays are looking to perhaps unload him. And I could see that being the case simply because of the fact they had such a contentious arbitration process this past winter that it seemed like there was a lot of bad blood just coming into the year, even before Stroman's injury started in spring training, between the Blue Jays organization and their best pitcher at the time. So I don't know that he's going to be available, and I don't know if he'd be cheap, but I would explore the possibility at least with the Blue Jays, who maybe don't want to pay what he would probably make in arbitration over the winter. So there maybe a guy like him could be available. I don't know. Certainly when he's on and he's
hard too. I mean, he's like, what was it? Just last week he was saying, Blue Jays are terrible. And like, I mean, he's not doing himself any favors with the fine folks of Toronto.
No, and he
kind of reminds me of when we went up there.
Yeah, and there's always those issues with certain guys, and I don't know if he's a problem in the clubhouse or not. We're not there in Toronto to really know that, but I can just see from an outsider's perspective at least the incredible talent level that's there, and if that can be harnessed and maybe being on a winner would help that a bit. I don't know, but amongst the pitchers that you mentioned, at least Craig, that is probably the one that would interest me the most. I think that Duffy is interesting, but I don't know if the Brewers would strike a deal for him alone. I think if we did, it would be both him and Merrifield in a bigger trade from Kansas City. So I don't know if that'd be worth pursuing or not, but that is more of a possibility.
I don't really think Merrifield is that much of an upgrade over what some of the guys that we have. I mean, he's not at a star level. I'd rather go over someone like Dozier, who I think could have a monster second half and really put out some nice power numbers. Merrifield does not have a long enough track record like Dozier does that I'm really that comfortable. Even though he's controlled more, I prefer going after someone like Dozier. And I also think we can get Dozier without giving up one of the blue chippers I mentioned. So, with that being said,
if the Twins are selling, though, I mean, that's a big question with Minnesota, I think.
Well, I don't see why they wouldn't be. So they're definitely not contending.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will end up being sellers, but they really haven't, it seems like, made many overtures, or at least hasn't been talked about publicly about the Twins trying to sell off any of their pieces yet.
No, so I think they'll come closer to the actual deadline, of course. But what I'm going to say about the fact that the Brewers have so many guys that they could afford to trade that basically aren't going to all be able to squeeze on the 40-man during this offseason, that I think even though some of their values are low, some of them at least perked them up a little bit, like you mentioned with Brett Phillips and Keon Broxton. Those two guys are two prime candidates of controllable outfield or possible starters on our team that should definitely be, if not the obviously headlining a deal, it's the second or third piece of a trade that'd be really attractive to a club that's selling. So,
yeah, but if Minnesota did like Carlos Gomez, I'm not sure they're going to like Keon Broxton. They're sort of cut from the same.
Well, no, and so, but with that being said, those are some nice chips to have as second or third, like guys that would really almost need to change the scenery themselves. And you might as well throw Domingo Santana in that mix. Obviously, you don't want to trade a guy with his value low, but with Aguilar's breakout and Thames being close to healthy again, and Braun eventually coming back, we really don't have any at-bats for Domingo Santana at the major league level at all this year that I can see. And so I think he's definitely a candidate to go. So that's three chips right there. And then you're looking at pitchers that we could stand to possibly move. And obviously, Brandon Woodruff seems like a candidate. Luis Ortiz seems like a candidate. Pretty much any other pitching prospect the Brewers might have further down the prospect list, I think those are all candidates. So I guess my strategy and what I want Stern to do is definitely more than last year. Definitely make a play for guys that if you can get target controllable guys, obviously that's the best to do. But I'm totally willing to move like 5 or 6 prospects and bring in a couple of guys. And one guy I want to point out that I kind of feel is a good fit for the Brewers. I don't know if we match up that well on trades, but that'd be Cole Hamels of the Rangers.
We threw him out as a potential candidate earlier in the year, I think, on our Twitter feed, which again is at Brew Crew Review #1, just the number 1.
Go find
exactly. He's not necessarily a rental because he is also he has a club option for $20 million for next year, which is obviously more than he's probably valued at. But for a team like the Brewers, having a guy like that, even for one more year, might be valuable at that price because his buyout price, I think, is $6 million. So $14 million difference if you're going to buy him out or not. So because of his high price tag, contract-wise, I think that we can get him fairly cheap.
Craig, doesn't Hamels have a no trade clause in Milwaukee?
Yeah, he does have it at 20 teams, but when it comes down to, that's a big concern.
So to acquire him, we would really have to be comfortable then, probably promising him that we would exercise that $20 million option for 2019, which I don't know if I don't know if David Stearns is going to want to limit what he can do in the off season financially if that's an issue, and I don't know if it is or not. But to lock in one guy for $20 million, who's got an ERA I think close to 4 at this point, I don't know necessarily the route Stearns is looking to go. But maybe.
Yeah, but you usually can't sign free agents to 1-year deals of that caliber of a player. And so it's kind of that rare opportunity to lock him in, not only for this playoff run, but for potential one next season too. And of course, if the Brewers aren't contending this time next year, they could always then, with only half his contract left, flip Hamels to get some of the prospect capital back too. So I would definitely be fine with picking up his option for next year if the Brewers were to acquire him with that strategy in mind. And if we are contending next year,
yeah. Sorry. No, I was just going to say one thing too, though. If we're planning on perhaps flipping him next year, that we would be flipping a guy who would be a free agent after the year, who probably would have limited value at that point, I would assume, because of the heftiness of his contract. So I don't know if we'd get much in return for him at the deadline next year if we're not in contention.
Well, of course, but that's why he's also not going to cost that much right now. in comparison to a controllable, unproven guy like Stroman. I mean, that's just totally apples and oranges. You're looking at Hamels kind of at the downside of his career. You're looking at Stroman as that controllable piece, but it's kind of a complete unknown. His talent's there. You hope Jared Johnson, if we were to acquire him, can squeeze it out of him. But there's also, that flame out possibility. So it's an interesting. With that being, it's an interesting comparison because I think Stroman would cost more in prospect capital, whereas a team like the Brewers, if they're going to make the playoff, if there's a one-game playoff at Miller Park as a wild card, I want Hamels at the ball, not Stroman. That's just me. So that's one thing to consider with where we are current spot in the standings. But whether or not the Rangers are even interested in any of our guys, it's just a name to throw out there. I think Stearns will go through all possibilities. But I do have some concern that he's going to, only look for bargains like the Neil Walkers of last year. You can almost point out he's done that already by acquiring someone like Brad Miller. Brad Miller is not someone who's going to move the needle. He's not really that much better than anyone we already had. I'd just as soon just give Saladino that bat and not even acquire Brad Miller. But
to me, Dozier's a little bit better than Neil Walker, but I could almost see the same deadline scenario playing out a little bit where say that we get Dozier. I think that's sort of like this year's version of Neil Walker, a guy who's a free agent, a second baseman, a veteran guy, and that could be fairly similar. And we made a move also last year to get Jeremy Jeffress at the deadline. We should remember that too, so maybe we did go out and get another couple of relievers to help the fatigue depend at this point. I don't know, because with the lack of starters on the market, and I hear what you're saying about Hamels, Craig, and I still like them too, but I just think that they're not going to want to financially handicap themselves going into the offseason. I could be wrong, but who knows?
Well, the other thing I do want to say about Hamels, I guess, real quick, is that Hamels is probably the most durable pitcher that, that's even out there as far as a starter. And I can't think of anything that would cripple an organization more than selling the farm to get a guy like Syndergaard or DeGrom, who, they're both phenomenal talents, but they kind of have glass arms. What did they combine for 50 innings last year or something? It was rough.
Yeah, to Craig's point, to bolster that scenario, I will say that, because of his salary, that I agree that we're not going to have to give up a ton to get Hamels. So if it is just a matter of money, I guess we truly don't know what Mark Adenote is willing to advance payroll to in a contending year, because it's been a number of years since we've been there. But, so perhaps money is not a factor. So from that perspective, I agree that we're not going to have to give up a ton to get Hamels. But, should be interesting.
It definitely should. And I would say if we're really going to push kind of a lot of our chips toward the center of the table, not go for it all in, so to speak, but really improve the ball club, I feel that we need to acquire 3 different pieces. And that would be a starting pitcher with high-end potential, whether it be controllable or someone like Hamels who's got a good track record. We need a possible middle infielder to upgrade to either second or short. We've got a lot of the same type of middling guys there now. I do still see Orlando Arcia as our future starting shortstop, so I think we should keep that in mind. I think getting a rental, whether it be Dozier, Machado, or someone else, for that middle infield spot makes the most sense. And then the third piece I think we definitely need, you guys mentioned, is a bullpen piece. But I don't think we need one of those high-end guys. I think we just need, to grab someone off of a team that's kind of desperate and selling at the last minute and willing to give up a bullpen arm with some experience. I think that would be, similar to Swarzak, but hopefully a little bit better. Something like that. I was going to say,
Craig, I bet you Swarzak is available from the Mets.
And then the fourth possible trade.
Too.
Definitely, those guys are available, unfortunately. But the last piece that we could consider upgrading would obviously be catcher. That would be the spot I'm the least concerned with. I am concerned, but I just don't see any real fits out there. Who knows what Stearns is looking at, but I would think that would be the least on my priority trade list, at least.
One other name we haven't talked about yet that we talked about him, but not in this sense. I could actually see us moving Arcia. I know that his value might be down a little bit just because he hit like 200 for the majors with us this year, but I think a lot of teams still view him as an up-and-coming prospect in some ways. I think that everyone knows how great his defense is, and they see that last year he hit pretty well, for for his age and his position. So I could see Garcia having some value. With Dubon coming up in the minors, do you guys think that, despite his injury this year, that Dubon could be our starting shortstop in 2019 and Garcia might be traded as one of the chips that we do trade at the deadline this year?
I don't think it'll be ready by opening day even. But, I mean, I could see it for the second half maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know when Dubon is exactly scheduled to come back. I thought I heard that he would be ready in time for next year, but I guess we never know because Jimmy Nelson was supposed to be back in May. So,
yeah,
I mean, I could see
don't think
Saladino being the starter opening day next year, but I could also see Saladino being like next year. He could wind up being this year's Eric Sogard. So I don't know.
Right. And that's probably
Absolutely.
the best role for Saladino. That's probably the best role for Saladino because he can play multiple positions and he really doesn't have a long track record of starting. I think he's great for that utility role, the middle infielder off the bench. And
Well, I mean, he might fall off a cliff too. I mean, like offensively, like Sogard did. But yes, that as well.
But in theory, just the multiple positions, I think that would suit him better than being an everyday starter and get the most value out of him in many ways.
Yeah, I would be hard-pressed to see us going into next year as Saladino, comfortable with Saladino being our starting shortstop unless he's some type of playoff hero or something for us, which I'd be fine with. But beyond that, most GMs probably wouldn't be comfortable with him other than like that, utility and field role. But you never know. I mean, he's still young enough that he could just have some kind of late breakout. But overall, and hopefully he does since he's a Brewer, but overall, back to the point of Orlando Arcia.
Craig, we got just about 20 seconds, just so you know. No pressure.
Oh, okay. Well, we better wrap
So
up soon.
what does our anonymous source Tom Carter say about Arcia? I guess that's one guy I didn't talk to this week.
He feels, you're not supposed to say his full name, remember, guys, but he feels that he should only be included as a second or third piece in a deal for a top and controllable guy like one of the Mets guys. Other than that, TC thinks we should keep him. So I agree with Tom, Mr. Anonymous. Anyway,
on that note,
guys.
Go Brewers!
Brewer fan.
Go Brewers. Stay classy.
Don't jump off the bandwagon yet, guys.
Don't jump off a bridge either.